Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Clark, Editor-in-Chief of British Strength magazine, and welcome to the first episode of British Strength podcast. On this episode we have Jack Lovett. He's 2 times Britain's natural strongest man, and he placed 5th at Worlds when he was competing. These days he's switched his full focus to his business. He's the owner of Spartan Performance, a gym located in the northeast of England, which caters to strongmen, strongwomen, athletes and powerlifters alike. It's an extremely good gym, one I've had the privilege of visiting and training at many times. On this podcast, Jack discusses with me his background, how he got into competing in natural strongman, his views on the sport currently, and his principles in business of responsibility, professionalism and passion. The key principles which have enabled him to succeed as he has. Now, on this podcast, Jack and I were each experiencing for the first time wearing headphones whilst doing a podcast and having the audio feedback to us at the time. Now, Jack took to this like a duck to water. However, I was a bit like a fish out of water, and it threw me a little bit, which you may notice. And for that reason, I became quite nervous and tried to speak as little as possible and just let Jack do the talking, which he actually did a very good job of. So I'm very grateful for Jack for making this an excellent first podcast, and I will absolutely endeavour to do better myself the next time. So, I'll just tell you a little bit about issue 16 of British Strength magazine, which is out now. In this issue, we have an interview with Paul George, who is a former IFBB pro bodybuilder, and he's an all-time world record holder in the squat in powerlifting. We also have articles on mindset by Bobby Butters and sticking points in your lifts, this time the raw squat and conventional deadlift by Andy Thomas Smith. We have an article by Jonathan Payne, who works with Alex Viada at Complete Human Performance, on being a hybrid athlete, how to program for being a hybrid athlete, amongst other great articles. So you really don't want to miss this one. You can go to www.britishstrengthmagazine.com and subscribe. It's £3 every other month, and even if I do say so myself, it's a wonderful deal. So I will get out of the way and let you enjoy this interview. Thank you. Okay, Jack Lovett, welcome to the inaugural British Strength podcast episode.
I'm honoured to be the first guest. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for having enough trust in me, I guess, to, agree to do it. So, because it is the first episode, I'm just going to have to talk a tiny bit about who I am, because a lot of the listeners, I'm guessing, will get this off social media.
Sure.
And they won't know who I am, because I only ever repost other people's stuff. So, my name is Alexander Clark. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of British Strength magazine. I'm also a powerlifter. So that pretty much sums it up. I can't really think of anything else to say about me. But why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Well, that was pretty succinct. Normally, I'm the worst person in the world to introduce myself, but I'm going to work on it for you today. So I'm Jack Lovett. I own Spartan Performance. I was a one-time competitive strongman, which I won Britain's natural strongest man twice and competed on the world stage as well. But I focus all my energies now on my business, which we're privileged enough to have you train here as well, which is Spartan Performance. And that pretty much takes up about 27 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's about working with clients from as young as 8 to actually in the 80s. And it could be a case of professional athlete or anybody in between as well. But the key thing for me, it's just a passion project, just genuinely wanting to help people to become the best they can be. Yes, I want that to be strength related, but in essence, just helping people becoming the best they can be. It's very rewarding.
And it is a wonderful gym.
Why, thank you.
Well, it is. I can vouch for you there, you know. It's the one I choose to come to. And we'll talk a lot about it on this. So just getting started. I listened to one of the podcasts you were on recently, and you were saying how your education, you actually did a classics degree. You did the ancient Greeks.
I did studied ancient history, Latin and Greek at university, which is probably not what most people would guess, and it's not possibly the best answer I could give you why. I think I took the easy way out. I was lost when I was at, so you've got like GCSEs, you go and do your A levels. I was lucky enough to go to a great school, but at that age, I had no idea what I wanted to be, and it was kind of, you were shoehorned. You're either going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. You know, none of those things appealed for me, and I'll freely admit, I had no clue. I had a passion for training and strength training, but nothing like Spartan existed anywhere in the country. So you couldn't say, well, I'd like a warehouse, and I'm going to fill them with metal, and I'm actually going to make a career out of it. So I ended up...
Could you give me an idea of when this was?
Well, then I would have to admit how old I really am. So this would be around about 2001, 2002.
Okay. And that was when you were going to uni?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I was lost. At A level, I enjoyed ancient history. I enjoyed the subjects. So I kind of took the easy way out. My thought process was get the best degree that I possibly could. It's like a sign of learning. And I won't lie, I have a passion for the subject. It fascinates me. It's the reason why my business is called Spartan Performance in the first place. But I never envisaged that it would lead to what I'm doing now. Much to my mother's displeasure that I didn't become a lawyer. I think that was her aspiration for me, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how what parents want you to do is so often kind of misaligned with what you want to do, and it can create conflict. It
can, to an extent. I think I was lucky. My mum was just very driven. She just wanted the best for me, so the best education. She wanted me to have a great job. Mm-hmm. Granted, I ended up doing something different to what she envisaged, but she's immensely supportive. And it may sound a little cheesy, but I wouldn't have my business. She made some huge sacrifices to help me when I started. And thankfully, she's been my biggest supporter for like the last 10, 12 years. Because in reality, it's like career suicide. So I could understand if she wasn't supportive, but she was. So credit where it's due. It could have been the other way, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm sure, I mean, any parent would be glad to see it work out as well as this has, you know what I mean? So, is there a reason why at that point you didn't really pursue like sports science or S&C as a career?
Absolutely. I'd never seen a career in sport that really got my passion. So I didn't study science subjects for A level. So when I was thinking, okay, I'll go to university, I'll do sports science. Well, I had no science A level, and that was the requirement for many. But also, even if I had, like I said, there was no warehouse facility. What we do now, there was no template back then. So even if I had the science background, I couldn't have said, well, great, I'll go and do sports science, I'll get my warehouse, I'll go and work in America, and everything will work out. I'll admit, I was lost. I really didn't know where I was going. I had a passion. Thankfully, that kind of, it didn't go away, it didn't dissipate, and I was brave enough to follow that. But I can't say I followed a template. It's not like I'm following in anybody's footsteps or anything. Mm-hmm. So maybe I was hamstrung a little bit, but I see a value in the subjects I studied.
Oh, absolutely. And when you say you had a passion, what were you doing back then, kind of when you were young, when you were first getting into sports and weight training, and when did the passion for actual strength training start?
I've always been very physical.
Yep.
So I've enjoyed sport at school. I was lucky enough to play rugby to a high level, athletics to a high level. I even dragon boarded to a high level. So I had an ability, an aptitude, but my favourite job in the whole world was when I was a labourer on a farm. So I started working on a farm when I was 13, 14, basically manual labour, and I loved it. There's something about it that it just appealed to me on a very basic level, being strong, being physical, and that translated to sport. And then when I was 14, I went to the Royal Grammar School in Newcastle, and they taught us barbell lifting. It was power clean and bench press. And that just opened my eyes, because to that point, I'd never been in a gym. But now you've got an outlet, so you want to be physical, and you can show how good you are, because I'm competitive by nature. So it really appealed to me, and I enjoyed it immensely, regardless if it was going to lead to a sporting competition or anything. I just enjoyed it. And I think that helped develop the passion. And then obviously, when you do things you enjoy, you spend time in lessons when you should be reading French, and you're designing a training program or trying to read Muscle and Fitness. Maybe it's a sign. And from that, it kind of switched me on to authors like Brooks Kubik, so dinosaur training. And again, I've said that in probably previous podcasts, it just appealed to me on a very raw level. I believe that a man should be physical, should embrace hard work. Mm-hmm. So when Brooks is talking about the history of strength sports into the 20th and 19th century and before, you saw what the old-time strongmen were doing. It just made sense in my head. I didn't need convincing that maybe it's a good thing to do. It felt like what I should be doing. So then that kind of one book led to another, and then you start thinking, well, actually, there's coaches out there that are using these methods and getting athletes to perform at the highest level. So I'm talking about Joe DeFranco. Mm-hmm. So I came across an article he wrote, which was strongman training for athletes. It's just simple, flipping tires, carrying farmers' walks or kegs. But that's the thing I love to do anyway. That's the thing that appealed to me. You've seen World's Strongest Man on television. I think it was 1995. And there was a guy called Manfred Herbal. What was I, 10, 11 years old or something? Why did that appeal to me so much? It was just hitting me right there and then. And that's going to translate to what I've been interested in ever since.
So when you got past a stage of just training at the school gym and whatnot, and then reading all these books, what made it Strongman rather than anything else? Obviously, you've mentioned that you were into the more kind of historical brute strength, which translated more to actual life. How did that lead you on to actually going, right? And I think we should mention at this point that you've won World's Strongest Natural Man in the past.
Calm down. I didn't get that far. Fifth,
right.
Was
sorry.
as good as I
My
got
apologies.
world. I won Britain's twice.
Right, okay. Apologies there for not having my research done enough.
I tried, just didn't quite get the win at Worlds.
Okay, so I mean, Britain's twice is pretty damn good though. So how did that translate onto that path? How did you get into strongman and this, that, and
For sure. Obviously, when I had a passion for that style of training, I was just at school or I was at uni, no career path. But it's when you realise you're doing it during the day, you're thinking about it at night time, there's that appeal. And I needed an outlet, something to do. And I wanted to compete in strongman, but at the time, I was 14 stone, 15 stone. You see the guys on the telly, I genuinely thought it wasn't applicable to me. And then when I was lucky enough to start Spartan Performance, I came across Britain's natural strongest man. Looked at the events, looked at the weights, and admittedly it was the first year that it happened, so they weren't particularly high. But now I could go and compete on the type of events and exercises I love to do anyway. So I'll admit, just took a gamble, thought it'd be worth a trip to London and go for the experience. Rightly or wrongly, it worked out pretty well. So I won the first one, and that opened more doors. So there was the subsequent Britain's Strongest Man. Then I found there was actually a world's natural strongest man. And as much as I love training, competing appeals to me far more, especially strongman. It's so exciting, and it's not motivating. It gets your blood up, but in the right way. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't understand personally, if I'm going to lift, why I shouldn't put that to the test somehow. So now I've got an outlet which I was lucky enough to be competitive in. And then when you get to the world level, well, we were spoilt. You're flown round the world. It was insane. You're paid to appear, your flights, accommodation, prize money. Honestly, you treat like a king. And it was, well, I'm reminiscing now. It's a big miss. It was a fabulous experience.
So I might be being a bit naive here, because I've never, unless I'd heard of like you and I'd spoken to you, I'd never heard of World's Natural Strongest Man. I'd only ever seen, the likes of Ed, Thor,
of course,
Marius, blah, blah,
what you
blah,
see on the television, yeah.
Is it a big thing, because it's obviously not televised alongside all the other stuff? Is it because you're saying, you're being flown here, you're being flown there, so it must be pretty big?
It's pretty much died of death now. I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore in the format that it did when I did it. It was a Hungarian business behind it, so it wasn't televised in this country, but there was fairly high production values. There were sponsors, telecommunication companies, so there must have been a decent level of money behind it, which was a pleasant surprise. Like I say, you're talking about competitions in the south of France, on a race course in Cannes. You go to Calgary, there's competitions in Dubai and Australia. It was fabulous. So it might not have been as well known in this country, but especially in Europe, it was massive.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something which would be quite good to have in general, because without like throwing any athletes under the bus, I think it's fairly obvious that to get to the top level in, World's Strongest Man and whatnot, you're not going to be natural. You're just not.
In sport in general, just because it's a misconception people have of me, I'm not deluded. I'm not going to sit there and I'm not even going to suggest that the natural strongman is the righteous route.
Right. It
just so happened that I could be competitive in it. And that was fine by me. But you're right.
So I guess what I'm getting at is it kind of stops a lot of the health risks that you might have to take to get to,
Potentially. But I'm not going to be naive enough to say we were drug tested. To what extent? I don't know. To what quality? I don't know. Could people compete in the naturals and potentially not be? Maybe. I believe it comes down to an ethical decision.
Right.
You got people at the Olympics. We live in the real world here. Competitive sport, they're not unassisted. Some may be, some aren't. I was fine with that. Even if it was called natural strongman, doesn't bother me. I don't think there's a limit to how good you can become personally. And as long as you're comfortable with that, what's wrong with that? And especially if you can be, I was reasonably competitive on the world stage. So.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mitigate the health risks of regular
theory,
strongman.
It suggests it could,
Yep.
but you know yourself, you can have greater health risks from a shit diet,
Yep.
from a poor lifestyle, on maybe drugs that you wouldn't be tested of for performance enhancements.
Absolutely.
So it sells a health picture, and I'm all for that. And it did my business very well. Rightly or wrongly, I received a lot of positive attention because I was competing on the natural strongman.
Okay.
Some people would judge that as better. I don't see it that way. I have no problem with the untested from an ethics or even a health perspective, done responsibly.
Okay, I guess that helps me to understand it a bit more then, because I don't know, I guess I had visions of like the difference in between like IFBB bodybuilding and then like what they call BMBF in the
So
UK.
that's natural bodybuilding.
Yeah, like completely natural, where the guys are like 50 to 100 pounds less. You know? That was the image I had out in my head. Are these guys just massive, just like the top guys are today? And
there were some big boys, without a shadow of a doubt, 150, 60, 180 kilos, some big guys. Is that healthy? Well, I'll let you decide that one. I was definitely one of the smaller guys.
Right. Right, so there we have the answer. It does.
It's long-winded. It's just, I don't personally see the problem. Some people looked at the naturals negatively, disputing how well tested it was. You can only be true to yourself. And then if you're happy to compete in that environment, well, then it's on you. Mm-hmm. It'd be a different story if I'm going to sit here and twist to you. Well, I came 5th in the last final of the Worlds I competed at, but I would have come 2nd if so-and-so hadn't taken this. I just believe I was beaten by better men. And if it was still going on, I was hoping I could have beaten them, but...
Yeah, you have to assume you're on a level playing field no matter what, don't you? Otherwise, like you say, it can breed that bad attitude if you're 100% natty and then maybe other people aren't. But I think it's really good to have those two distinctions, just like it is in powerlifting, because, you know, if you're a kid and you want to stay natural, then you're better off having an option which is tested. You know what I mean? Like,
so I say there's no world naturals that I'm aware of now, but there's a Britain natural strongman scene. How extensively tested? I don't know, but I like having the option. So I train a lot of prospective strongman and women. I want them to have the option and not to feel that to be competitive, they have to take this or that. The honest answer is they don't. I know some natural guys, legitimately natural, that have done fabulously well, untested, you know? Too many people worry about that or worry about other people instead of just fucking focusing on themselves.
Absolutely.
Just be the best you can be. You may be pleasantly surprised with the result you can get. And don't waste energy fucking bitching about anything else.
100%. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a video popped up on YouTube the other day, and it's called The Problem with Powerlifting. I'm not going to give these guys a shout out or even say who it was from, because they've got enough, you know, subscribers and whatnot. But they were basically they tried to out, I believe, a certain athlete who's in British powerlifting or the IPF, basically just trying to say that he isn't natural, and they complained about how well things were tested for a good 10 minutes, and it's got mixed reactions. But it's like you're saying, it's just, we don't need that. You know what I mean?
I can understand if there's a natural federation, you want it to be as ethically run as possible, as highest quality. But we're not responsible for that. We can't dictate that. So if you're going to spend your time bitching and twisting, I don't see how that helps matters. No. Not in the slightest. And if you're concerned about that, go all the way to the pinnacle of natural sport, the Olympics. Is that a level playing field? You know, I had a Mitsapia teaching at Spartan at the weekend.
Yep.
His opening line was he's taken 100 drug tests in his professional career and he's passed them all, but he was not clean for any of them. Yeah. This is a guy that went to the Olympics for Olympic weightlifting. He didn't say it to show off or glorify that he got round the testing. It's just a fact of sport. Right or wrong, it's the way it is.
That was his first line in the seminar.
Well, it grabs people's attention, doesn't it? Yeah, it's true.
I wish I would have been off for that now.
But then you listen to the extent of how they had to get around the tests. Fuck, I couldn't be bothered. Yeah.
Really, was it a lot?
I personally wouldn't want to have to go and do a urine test with a sex toy simulating my genitals filled with my brother's urine and hope that it works out for the best. That's not for me. So.
Oh, that's crazy. Especially around competition when you're already stressed.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just adds another stress, more anxiety, this, that, and the other.
Personally, for me, it's not worth it, but I'm not one to judge.
Okay, so switching gears. You finished competing strongman in when?
The last competition was 2013.
Okay, so at that point that was kind of, we're transitioning kind of, I might have the dates wrong here, between having Marius and then we moved on to more kind of the Shaw era.
Absolutely. Marius was 2009 was his last World's Strongest Man.
Right, okay, so we're already in the Shaw era.
Sure.
There. So what do you think of strongman currently? What do you make of it?
I think it's in a strong position. You look at the competition this past weekend in Dubai, was it £70,000 prize money, first place? That's amazing. That's unheard of. Because if you think of strongman, it's like the most unprofessional sport in the world that demands a professional commitment. There's no way the athletes are rewarded anywhere near as much as they should be. If you're looking at the top strongmen in the world, how many really make any sort of money?
Yeah, and I'm sure I heard that the actual prize for Worlds was something like 40 or 50 a few years ago.
I heard it was £40,000, but that might be £40,000 worth of sponsorship, right. Not necessarily there's a check for £40,000.
But now if you get into that point where it's got 70,000 in Dubai, it's definitely progressed.
It's a step up.
Yeah.
I would love to see the athletes rewarded for the sacrifices, the efforts they've got to go through, because it's the feats that you see them do in the events are superhuman, but the commitment it takes, it's a 24/7 job to be that big, to be that strong, but to be that versatile. You would want to see them rewarded. So it looks like it's going that way a little bit. I'd like to see it more so.
Yeah, and it's easily just as good to watch as a lot of the other sports, you know what I mean? You know, for example, like, I don't know, boxing, MMA, it's just as interesting. You know, it has multiple dynamics to it. So it, like you say, it's deserving of, you know, like a higher prestige,
Absolutely.
Higher rewards.
It's an amazing sport. Like I said, 1995, I was a kid. I was just totally enamored by what I saw on the television over Christmas. It's fabulous. There's a great following. I just wish that it was a bit more popular, maybe more mainstream. And that's selfishly for the athletes themselves. They sacrifice an enormous amount. It would be nice to see them get the rewards.
Yeah, or at least to be able to live as full-time athletes, which only one or two of them, well, not one or two, only a handful maybe can.
Got to be a small handful. I don't know for sure, but maybe Shaw, maybe Hathor Bjornsson.
Yeah.
Many
I mean,
more.
Ed can, but that's...
Well, that was for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
He achieved amazing things, but it was a very short period of time. He's since retired. He's into the promoting side of things. I think he has other business ventures.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to look after his family. Not killing himself to £40,000.
Yeah,
to
the
be
prize
the
money
world
was...
champion.
Yeah.
It's like a goal bonus at a weekend in a football club.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's madness when you think about it. But do you think the way it's televised, if they changed that would change things?
It's an interesting question. One of the gripes, Worlds might take place in, say, May, but it's not televised in this country till Christmas. So there's a huge gap. I think until recently, the athletes couldn't even say how they'd placed, yet we all knew. But is it is it suitable for television? Because the strongman competition takes a good while. So you look at World's Strongest Man, does the final, it's filmed over like 3, 4, 5 days. There might be an event in the morning, then one in the afternoon.
Yeah, you couldn't do it live. It'd be impossible to do it live.
Maybe not, but then Giants Live with Europe's Strongest Man, the last couple of years, they've been doing that in one venue, and that's like 3, 4 hours. As a spectator experience, it's awesome.
Yep.
Whether you could get that on television, I don't know.
Well, I guess maybe you could if you had, similar to, say, like cycling. They televise that over many hours. And I can imagine that some people maybe sit in front of the TV and watch it for all 4 hours. I don't know. Maybe you could do an event, switch to maybe, I don't know, some highlights from previous years, or I'd like to think interviews.
Because surely that's where the money is, and the television side of things. So the more money, better off for the athletes.
I'm sure they've thought about it anyway, and I'm sure they've probably had this same discussion, and maybe there's, who knows, maybe there's something in the pipeline.
It's definitely not an untapped resource, but there's potential in it, and it'd be great to see it realised.
Yeah, I'd like to see it realised. So, let's talk about your gym. One of the best gyms I've ever been to, and certainly of its kind, having the functional training and the strongman, the best gym I've been to. What did it take for you, and what was the vision that it took in order to get this together?
The initial vision, the books I was influenced by. I came across Joe DeFranco, looked at what he was doing. So it was a warehouse in New Jersey, very blue collar. So it was just weights, atmosphere, and attitude. But he was getting results with the highest level of athlete. So obviously it appealed to me. I actually flew out there, did a mentorship, so I could see it firsthand. So that's going to instill the passion, the interest. That type of training appeals to me. But not only that, but it can get great results. And it's a fairly unique experience. You're not going to get it at a sports centre, a leisure centre, or even like a health club chain. It's a very unique experience. So that fueled my initial desire. So it's simple. I didn't want to have to commute to New Jersey to train in the type of gym that I wanted to. So I decided to build one myself. I wanted to build the type of gym that I wanted to train in myself. But the training methodology, in my opinion, that was the way forward.
Right.
So that's where it started. To get there took a monumental amount of time and sacrifice. I couldn't tell you how many 90, 95-hour weeks, just non-stop for years and years at a time. It's almost like you put your entire life on hold and commit fully to it. So it took a lot of hard work.
And did you have to, well, I'm presuming you had to leave a job to do this? So when you say 90 to 95 hours, you had to be comfortable having left a job, having enough finance behind you, or enough money behind you to do this, and then just commit. Is that what it took?
Do you want to know the truth?
Yeah, of course.
No business plan other than I believe I can make an awesome training facility. That was it. No money. I had a fucking minus 20 credit rating, so I had no credit, nothing. It was just a pure gamble. I think the only thing I had on my side was passion. So the people around me that I'd spoke to, I was lucky enough, some people believed in the vision I had. So when I said, I'm going to get a warehouse, it's going to have 3 power racks, some dumbbells, and that's it. And we're going to have the best workouts of our life. It's a hard sell. No mirrors, no cardio machines, definitely no cable system. It was a huge gamble, and I wouldn't advise it to anybody, but there was no template. I couldn't look and say, well, that's how that gym did it. How they work in New Jersey, it's a completely different environment, different economics. It's a different culture in the States. Even now, as successful as we are, it's almost like a constant battle to convince many people that this is actually how to train. When I went to New Jersey in 2009, you've got parents queuing up at the door, and all they've got is a checkbook. Make my son, make my daughter the next big thing. They see that the culture for sporting excellence is different, or very different, should I say. So if you come back to here, it's almost, you had to make it happen. You had to make people believe. And it could have went south. There was a few dicey moments, but I think that's where passion comes into play. If you believe in something with your heart and soul, and I think what helped me, we discussed earlier, this some level of sport and achievement, but I was practicing what I preached.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was just saying, I saw this video, do this. I'm living in and breathing those training methods. I'm giving everything I've got to be the best I can be, admittedly in a niche sport, but 5, 6, 7 days a week, I'm committed to using those methods to get some level of success. That translated nicely to my audience, and we built from there.
And when you started off, did you have members or did you have clients? Was it all clients to start off?
Members.
Right.
When I started, I can be my biggest fan, but I can also be my biggest doubter. And authenticity matters immensely to me. So when I started, yes, I was well read. I'd bought DVDs. There was nothing on YouTube then. I'd traveled, but I didn't believe I was a proven commodity. So I had a facility where people could use equipment, and I was there basically to help them on a day-to-day basis. But I didn't value my expertise enough to have clients. But we soon developed program design, coaching from then on. I believe you've got to be able to back up your bullshit before I personally would ever market it or ever charge. So if I don't think that I'm the best that I could be at that particular thing, then I wasn't happy to charge for it. Is that the right business model? Probably not, but it worked within the constraints that I had. I felt like I had to build the facility, prove that it could deliver results for myself and with people in a limited capacity, which was membership basis, which did help the business because then on a monthly basis, you've got revenue coming in. But ultimately, especially for a facility like this, you can't just rely on membership fees. And as well as that, I want to help people. I want to coach people, whether that's program design, nutrition, technique coaching. You want to do all those things. But for me, it's I say it a lot, you have to be able to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Christian Thibodeau said he likes to think of a coach, we are our own first clients. If we can't apply the theory and knowledge and get results to ourselves, how can we ever charge somebody else to get results for them? And that's been instilled in me a long time. I need to be authentic. I think that's the best sales tool there is. I'm fucking terrible at making social media posts or adverts. There's no smoke and mirrors. What we do works. But I like a track record. So I wouldn't speak on a subject. I didn't present seminars for 3 years. I probably could have fluffed one, winged it a bit earlier, but I didn't have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours coaching clients, getting results. I think that's one of the things that makes myself, but also Spartan, unique to an extent. I see new gyms opening all the time, and that's great. I'm supportive of it. But the gym will open, they've got 100 grand's worth of kit, or debt, as you want to call it. They've got no track record of clients, but they've marketed well. So now they're an online coach. They're charging this. I'm a little bit more old-fashioned. You've seen the pictures on the wall. So It's almost like a stamp of approval. If I'm going to attempt to educate you on anything or converse on a subject, I need to have hundreds or thousands of hours getting results. We train Donna Moore. She's the world's strongest woman. She's awesome. She's a great athlete. In reality, there's no real challenge there. She's almost the finished article. What's probably, I can name drop her, that helps. But what has to be done for every Donna Moore, 10, 15 average Joe, average Jane clients that have followed similar methodology, similar training, and gotten stronger. And that gives you that level of authenticity.
I know you've just said that you could name drop her. Because I know you've trained a lot of clients and there are a lot of people up on the wall there. Who else have you, who are some other people?
Is this in the strength sport world?
Well, no, because I know you've trained fighters too. You've probably...
So I've got fighters that are either in the UFC or have been in the UFC.
That's pretty cool.
Professional footballers, but just probably more so importantly, 9, 10-year-old children that go from a school team, get signed up to an academy, then go to a club, get a professional contract. So I'll use an example of Alex Gilead. So I first met him when he was at school, got signed to the Newcastle Academy, worked his way up through the ranks, got a professional contract. That's a long period of time. That to me is far more impressive than, for argument's sake, get whoever's a current Premier League footballer. Well, they're already the finished article.
Yeah.
They're already a Premier League footballer. But we have them. It's something I like, regardless of the sport. We've got those that compete at the top level to those that are aspiring to compete even at the amateur level. And I think that's a key test of your skills as a coach or your programming. Getting somebody who's a professional to keep performing is nowhere near as challenging as sort of cultivating a talent. So it's one of the reasons why I'm not particularly keen to name drop, because I think it does a little bit of a disservice to the hundreds, thousands of clients we have. You may not know their name, but they've put a lot of hard work into play.
But it's pretty cool, and I guess it's a testament to your ability to be, how do I say it, multifaceted in your coaching, being able to look at the needs of the sport and then take the athlete from day one, have them avoid all the setbacks, avoid all the injuries. Like you said, with that young kid, Alex Gilead, did you say? I don't follow football, so I wouldn't know, but there are a lot of pitfalls you can go through. And like you say, rather than just having someone who has the optimal genetics already, and then just being like, oh, I train him, I train her. It's like you say.
You know Andy Bolton. He's a reasonably well-known name in powerlifting. So I coached Andy. Now I could just leave it there. Jack Lovett, Andy Bolton's coach. But that's not really the whole story.
No.
He was like the greatest deadlifter of all time before I ever even met him. He was accomplished 10 times over. I helped him in certain areas on certain things. So it'd be a little bit dishonest or disingenuous if I threw that name out, because I don't play any role in the achievements he's most well known for. But I take a great deal of satisfaction that an athlete or even a coach, which he is, of that caliber, would trust us to help him in some capacity.
Yeah, that's more of the accolade, isn't it? Being able to help anyone,
of course,
like you say. So, from what I've always been able to gather from you is that spirit of hard work. And just like a bit ago when I asked you about like what would you typically do in a day, and I think I remember you saying something like, I go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, I wake up at 5, and then I do this, that and the other. And I've always been quite fascinated by people who succeed in whatever it might be. And could you just kind of like explain a little bit about where that work ethic came from? Do you feel like you always had it, you were always driven, or did you ever have a period in life where you were just thought, you know what, I feel I'm lazy, I need to start really working on, sharpening the axe, so to speak, or
Of
were you
course.
just always driven?
No. I cruised through school. I got a scholarship to go to the Royal Grammar School when I was 14. So I went from being a big fish in a small pond at a state school to being a little fish in a very big pond. Because nothing captured my attention, my imagination, my direction, I'll admit I coasted. Don't know how I got the qualifications I did at GCSE or A level. Just that was almost on autopilot. Does that make me lazy? I personally don't think it does. I needed a direction. I needed something to work towards. I'm very goal orientated. So when I get a goal, when I have a passion, then I will put everything I can into the pursuit of that goal, whether that's education, whether it's sport, it makes no difference. So when I've got a goal, you can hear the change in my voice. I'm immensely passionate. I don't understand. How can you achieve anything without effort? Anything worthwhile, you can't. And then you look at the effort you're putting in, and is that really 100%? Is that really everything that you've got? Something I heard, I believe it was Joe DeFranco, would always say he may not be smarter than his competition, but he would never be outworked by them. Don't know if that's true, but it sounds pretty cool to me. I just don't understand. You have to work so hard, and then you'll achieve something, and you'll know yourself in powerlifting. You'll have got to probably a very good level of strength without a massive amount of commitment.
Yeah.
And you could have just stopped there, a 3-plate bench, 4 plates on a squat. In the scheme of things, is it that impressive? No. Is there a Chinese girl warming up without a Mac somewhere? Yeah. Our potential, I wouldn't say is infinite, but I don't know anybody that's maxed their potential, whether it's from, physical perspective or even in business. So yes, in that regard, I then become driven. Do you know why? I want to be the best. Like genuinely, that gets me up early in the morning. It keeps me up late at night. I desperately want to be the best that I can be. Whether that's an individual, I think as a person that's a work in progress, but certainly as a business, because I'm in the service industry. I'm not just here to put pictures of Andy and Donna on the wall and say, oh, in my day when I did Strongman. It's not about that. I'm here to help people, and I want to do that to the best of my ability. And it's amazing what you can achieve if you keep going. It's like, am I maxed out? Most likely not. There's always more you can do. Whether that's more work or just working smarter is up for debate, but I desperately want to be the best.
Okay, so you mentioned getting up early. And you hear that a lot these days. Like, I don't know if you heard of a guy called Jocko Willink.
I certainly have.
Yeah, and he's always posting on his Instagram 4 o'clock, 4:30, etc. When did you realise that getting up early was one of the things you had to do in order to be able to succeed?
As soon as I had a business, there was no other option. So as a case in point, we had 2 weeks to turn an empty warehouse into a functioning business to take money. So that was 20, 21-hour days. Why? Because we only had 2 weeks to turn a shell into some semblance of a business that will generate money. So it wasn't like, well, I heard this guy does that, or I read that book. Sheer fucking necessity required it.
Sorry, I was just going to say then, and that translated down the road. So you've had these number of weeks where it's been like, well, I've done these 21-hour days here. Did that just spiral into...
You do what needs to be done to get it started. Granted, once the business was open, it's not a 21-hour day. But ultimately, you have to get up that little bit earlier. So if my first client is 5 or 6, well, I need to be up, I need to be fed, I need to be prepared. It sounds cheesy. I believe it's the Cosgroves. They recommend we need to be, as coaches, the best part of our client's day every day. So when they come to the gym at 6 in the morning, tired, shit night's sleep, poor personal life, maybe I've had it 10 times worse. but I hide that. I'm there to give them the best hour or whatever time period they're in that gym. So it's about being professional, is it not? I don't just want to do my job, take somebody's money. I want to do it to the best of my ability. So especially in the gym business, that dictates long hours, sacrifices. And I was fine with that. I didn't sit there thinking, well, this is unfair. This isn't what I signed up to be. Nobody ever told me it would be easy. And especially remember, I've said it a few times today, there was no template. I'm pretty sure I was the first warehouse gym in the UK. But certainly running a business model like mine, nobody was doing it. Nobody had a mortgage. Nobody could buy a car or anything like that. So you've got to make it happen. So that'll instill a work ethic. And then thankfully, you become smarter at business. You learn to delegate. Eventually, you'll become lucky enough to maybe have a team around you. Mm-hmm. So I'm very lucky now to have a very good team around me, which helps the business do more. But in the beginning, it's always going to be you, isn't it?
Yeah. So kind of just going over that, like you said, it's necessity. I don't think anyone gets there by some crazy different way. I don't think maybe successful people, bar maybe musicians or something like that, are able to actually wake up late and still be able to thrive. I think everyone in your position in our industry, in the strength game, this, that, and the other, it's like you say, it is necessity.
It's a necessity, but it's also our responsibility to provide the best service possible. So whether that's the best facility, the best coaching for myself personally, or for me to build a team. So I can build a gym, but then I've got to spend even more time developing, cultivating a team that matches my work ethic, my ethos, my ambitions.
And you have to be an example for them, in a way. Well, you do have to be an example.
You've got to walk the walk. I've got to lead by example. How can I expect a client to just suck it up with a huge squat on their back? 80, 90, 95% of the max, and get the work done? If I don't know what that feels like, how can I expect a client to trust in me to get them to 10 pull-ups? Well, because I'm a strong man and I eat 10 cheesecakes a day, I don't do pull-ups. I have to lead by example, whether that's in training, whether that's in how I dress for work, how I speak, how I conduct myself. It translates down. I have to lead by example because I want my coaches, my staff, I want them to lead by example. It's really important to me.
And let's talk about your staff a little bit, because you have some cool people working for you. Obviously, you've got Laura, and then you've got Jack and Jenny.
Yes.
So they're your three coaches.
Yes. And everything else in between. The cleaners, receptionists, they can make a pretty good shake.
Yeah.
Got to be multi-talented.
Because like you say, well, I mean, it's not like it's a pure gym where they have separate cleaners and separate this, that, and the other. It's not a corporation. It's everyone chips in.
Yes.
But just want to talk a little bit about your staff, because they're, in their own right, they're pretty accomplished. They're good coaches.
At the moment, as we're speaking now, I'm in a very privileged position that I've got a professional team behind me. I think that's the highest accolade I could give anybody.
Yeah.
They conduct themselves professionally. Are they the finished article? Fuck no. But neither am I. They have a desire to be better, so they're willing to learn, but they'll also conduct themselves to a high standard professionally.
Yeah.
I'm 10 years in now? Without going into too many details, that's the biggest problem that I've encountered in business, is staffing. Having the right people around you or the wrong people. And there's a couple of occasions in my history where it was touch and go, where everything I've built would have been destroyed by the individuals that I happened to have in my premises at the time.
Right. You just said you don't want us to go into too much detail, so I won't pry. But when you say destroyed, do you mean sabotaged deliberately? Or do you mean it was just, they were so bad that you just had to sack them?
Well, ultimately, it's a reflection of myself.
Right.
Lead by example, set the tone.
Yeah.
Right now, I've got professionals who want to be the best they can be. They're here for a genuine reason to help every client. They're humble enough to understand they don't know everything, and they're not too old to learn new skills, new tricks. When you say it like that, it doesn't seem like much of an ask. In my experience, the unprofessionalism in this business is fucking immense. It's disgraceful. We're looking in the local region where we are now. I'd be amazed if we went into any gym that every coach was insured, had a valid first aid certificate. I'd be amazed if they had a DBS check to work with children. It's quite an unregulated industry. So when you've got that level of unprofessionalism, you're going to encounter people that won't hold themselves to that high standard, or they won't aspire to that standard. I'm lucky enough to have people like that now.
I 100% agree, and like you say, it's unregulated. If you had like the bad practice in this industry, I was thinking this, if you look at what some coaches have, some, not even athletes, just average Joes and whatnot, do, if you had the equivalent, say, by a doctor or this, that and the other, they'd be struck off. Like, there'd be no question about it. They either wouldn't pass the training or they'd be struck off.
It's like malpractice. They're not conducting themselves to a professional standard, but the one paid to the professional standard.
And you can earn, and like you say, you can earn a lot of money from coaching people. You're taking a lot of money off people to show them and tell them what to do. So, like you say, you should be putting a lot of effort into those people if they're paying you £25 an hour or this, that,
it makes no difference.
Or even more.
You put the effort into yourself to be the most professional coach you can be. Because a coach isn't just sets, reps, percentages, or even programming. Think about the amount of youths that we work with here. We're role models. Not even to the youths. We have to be a role model or a positive influence to every client we work with. I keep coming back to walking the walk, being authentic. We lead by example. I put a lot of expectation, demand, or responsibility onto ourselves because it's the least that I expect. You know, it's the way it should be. Unfortunately, not many. Don't get me wrong, there's some great coaches out there, and I love meeting them, I love networking with them, but there's many that I couldn't possibly compliment with the title coach.
Yeah, I 100% agree, especially about the use thing. You know, any adult who is going to interact with youths, like teachers, a coach, you know, even their team coach, their like football coach or whatever, they are role models and they look up to you and other people more than you'd ever think.
Well, of course.
So,
You think what we do, I firmly believe that strength training, how we train people physically, has so many positive connotations to life in general. You mentioned the work ethic. If you can instill and sustain a hard work ethic in the gym, that only translates to outside of the gym. Yeah? Teaches you discipline, responsibility, consistency. All those qualities, so if you instill those in a youth, well, you can apply them in school, which is very important, in day-to-day life. I think it's a positive training inside an environment like ours can be very enriching for the life out there as well.
yeah, and it's cliched, but it keeps them away from other stuff.
Of course it does. It's a cliche, but it's true.
It's absolutely true, yeah. So talking about the development of your facility, which is always ongoing, you seem to, what I get from you is that you're not just taking all the money and buying flashy cars and flashy house, this, that and the other, you're putting it back into the gym.
Absolutely. Well, one, maybe there's not that much money to begin with for the flashy cars.
Well, I'm not suggesting that as such, but...
No. Again, it comes down to professionalism, and responsibility. I'm very lucky to be in a position where my business brings in revenue. But I'm in this for the long game. I see the bigger picture. I've got huge ambitions. Yes, we're 10 years old, but I've got plans for the next 10 years. It's my responsibility as a gym owner, business owner, or even the boss of my staff. We need to reinvest. I will reinvest into my staff, so there's constant learning. We're never the finished article, but I'll always reinvest into the facility. Yes, I've got to make sure I can have food on my table, but it's very easy to, if you have a good month or a good year, to allocate funds elsewhere. Well, I'm very disciplined in that regard. I don't want to rest on my laurels, and that's partly, this is not exactly the most secure business to be in. There's always another gym. There's always a gym that'll charge less or have got shinier toys. So what I want my clients to see is they respect the professionalism of myself and my staff on a day-to-day basis, but the facility is constantly evolving. It's constantly improving. To me, it should be reassuring that we have their interests at heart. Granted, I'm very selective on the equipment I'll get. I will only bring something in if I'm convinced it'll improve the programs that we offer. Fuck, it's what we have to do. Honestly, it's an alien concept to me, not to work hard, not to be professional, but not to reinvest into the business because I want it to grow. I'm very happy right now. I'm very privileged. That's now. That's not tomorrow. That's not next week. If I took that attitude, I don't think you'd want to do a podcast with me in 6 months. I'll be obsolete.
No, absolutely.
Or at least that's the way I feel.
Yeah, that's one of the things which makes me find you interesting as a person. Your desire to not just work hard now, but you're setting little goals. You're always developing, your own training, other people's training, the gym's training. The gym. Tell me about some of the recent developments in the gym in terms of equipment and even what you've got upstairs now.
Probably the most significant, we've developed a second level, which we installed infrared saunas, showers, changing rooms.
Yeah.
I've always been a fan of the sauna, the benefits from it. But I won't lie, even for a moderately successful business established, it was a huge investment without a guaranteed return. But it's been invaluable. It's really enriched the experience for the clients that I've got, that's my job. I want to get them the best possible result. And that's one of the ways to do so, because we can train them, we can push them hard, but you know yourself, recovery is an enormous thing. As well as that, maybe on a more superficial level, we've invested a lot of money so it looks fucking amazing. It's a very good sales pitch. Not everybody that comes through the door is sold by my speech of I did 21-hour days 8 years ago. They're going to judge the facility and how it looks. Yes, I'm a warehouse facility, but I take immense pride that everybody that comes to us is amazed how clean, how tidy it is, how clinical it looks. It's the way it should be. And having that development upstairs, it's improved the quality of our programs, our clients' recovery, but it's improved the image of the business itself. So.
Yeah, I very much like the upstairs bit. Looks very plush.
Yes.
Very swanky. It's a nice place to chill out.
Thank you.
In terms of the infrared sauna, what does that actually do for your recovery? How does it work?
You could go into Google, you could type in infrared sauna benefits, and there's a multitude of them. So it's going to improve the immune system. It's going to relax the muscles. It's going to have a myriad of health benefits, whether it's blood pressure. And I believe those things because you can research them. You can say, well, this study was done with that person. But what really sold it for me, every single client that has went and used it, the second they come out, they say that they feel better. Bear in mind, they pay to use it, so it's it has that much of a profound impact. And that's good enough for me. It really is.
Very popular in Russia, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it was Dmitry Klokov, when he came to my facility, he was very disappointed that I didn't have a sauna. He's like, nice gym, where's the sauna? I was like, do you think we should have one? Yes, in fact, thank you, Dmitry. He even identified where we should build it. Yeah.
Well, that's a good enough reason for me.
Yeah.
So lastly, moving on to you. I believe you've had a couple of injuries over the past few years. Some pretty bad ones.
Understatement. Yeah.
Do you have any plans to get back into competition? Or?
I won't lie. It's killing me that I'm not competitive, that I don't have an outlet for it. I feel like I've been a little bit unlucky in terms of injuries. I'm not looking for sympathy, but I've had 3 fairly significant surgeries, but they were back to back. So you're out for 3 to 6 months, try to get back to where you were, and then another surgery comes along. So you end up to the point where I am, you lose a lot of momentum. And whether I'd like to admit it or not, it does play on your mind. So my most recent injury, I had knee surgery. I would say it's a lot better healed physically than I am mentally. And I'm reluctant to admit that. And it takes the wind out your sails a little bit. But again, it comes back to it. I need to be a role model. I need to lead by example. If you were a client of mine and you'd had a surgery and you wanted to compete again, well, I'm going to do everything in my power to help you do so. And I will do that for myself. Where I compete is the catch. Obviously, I used to compete in Strongman. I'm also a little bit vain. If I'm going to do something, then I need to be competitive at it. I'm not really interested in taking part.
Yep.
That holds no interest to me. So whatever I put my energies into, I at least want to be competitive, which means you'll probably see me on the powerlifting platform, especially if you can make the meets shorter, so they don't take all day.
So, I mean, I've seen you hit some pretty big numbers, actually, especially on bench. 200 for 5, was it?
Yeah, that's about 230 now. So press and strength's pretty good. It never used to be a strength of mine.
You're 120, roughly?
Yeah, 120. If it's been a good weekend, maybe slightly higher.
Right.
120.
So that'll be pretty competitive. That'll be pretty good as a sub 125 bencher. So it'd be good to see.
I would like it very much. You've got to kind of put your work to the test as far as I'm concerned.
So that's the direction you'd go in, powerlifting rather than strongman, is that what you're saying?
Potentially. Yeah. I don't see how, and maybe I'm being a little bit soft here, running with 400, 450 kilos, 500 kilos on my back, whether my knee will hold up to it.
Yeah.
It's a concern of mine. Or will I be competitive enough to make it worthwhile? Because it's a fairly selfless sport. There's not much return, is there?
Well, no.
No, there's not.
Unless, like you say, you got to get to the real upper echelons for there to be a return. And then, even then, like you're saying, strongman, is the return outweighed by what will happen to you, you know?
Of course.
Yeah.
And those things play on my mind. Coincidentally, whilst being injured so much, there's been enormous developments business-wise. So it's about having the time. But I'm not one to make excuses. Yeah. So
there is way more time if you're a powerlifter, though. Like you say, you can train 4 days a week. Hard workouts, obviously, but you've got those other 3 days. Whereas strongman, as I understand it, you pretty much have to train 6 days. If you're not training 6 days, then
it depends.
Can you really do it?
Personally, I thrive on high volume, high frequency. Yep. I'm a training addict. Yep. It's a stimulus that it gives me a lot of satisfaction. So I enjoy training on a daily basis. As well as that, especially with strongman, to me it's a skill. So if I want to get better at a certain skill, the more often I practice that skill, the better.
And there are a lot of sub-skills within
For sure.
the skill.
when it comes with the events themselves.
Yeah.
But ultimately, whether that's you, me, or anybody else, it's what you can recover from. So you say 4 days is optimal. Maybe it's 10, 15 sessions a week. Maybe it's 2. Ultimately, it's what you can recover from. I just personally happen to respond well to high frequency.
Yeah. So we might see you on or hopefully we'll see you on a powerlifting.
Well, this is the first time I've spoken publicly about it, so
we'd be glad to have you. It'd be cool to see.
I would very much like to do something.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for coming on the very first episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, pal.